poet and painter, William Blake, one of the great masters of the Western Tantric tradition, was trying to explain his non-dual way of seeing to a friend of his. And his exasperated friend said to him at one point, "Are you trying to tell me that when you see the sunrise, you do not see a round disk of fire, somewhat like a guinea?" And William Blake replied, "Oh, no, no. I see an innumerable company of the heavenly host, crying, 'Glory, glory, glory is the Lord God Almighty.'" On another occasion, in a more rational mood, he described the same thing in this way. He said, "When the doors of perception are cleansed, everything will appear as it truly is, infinite." When the doors of perception are cleansed, when the way we see, or rather, when the one who sees is divested of all the limitations that thoughts and feelings superimpose upon it, it stands revealed as the true and only I of ever-present, unlimited awareness. And what it sees changes in correspondence with this changing view of itself. As a man is, so he sees. If we believe we are a temporary, finite self, then our experience will appear in direct correspondence with this belief as a multiplicity and diversity of objects and others. It is for this reason that Ramana Maharshi said, "The I thought is the mother of the world." Now, when this apparently separate inside self looks out at the outside world, it asks itself, do I perceive the world or do I project the world? If If I perceive the world, it must be made of matter. If I project it, it must be made of mind. In other words, as Loha just quoted Jung saying, mind and matter are not two separate realities. They are two sides of the same thing. What is that thing? It is the ignoring of reality. Mind and matter only come into apparent existence as separate, independent entities when the reality of our experience is overlooked, ignored, forgotten. If we truly want to know what the nature of the world is, we have to first know the nature of the one who knows it. And how are we going to find out the reality about the one that knows the world? In other words, how are we going to find out the reality about ourselves? If we want, in everyday life, if we want to know about a particular subject, we simply give it our attention. If we want to know about the nature of ourself, we do the same thing. We just simply give it our attention. In order to know an object, awareness must rise as the mind, and in the form of the mind, it can seem to turn away from itself and know something that is other than itself. In fact, the word attention comes from two Latin words. A, meaning to or towards, and tendere, meaning to stretch. So when we give our attention to an object, awareness moves away from itself, stretches away from itself towards the object. In order to know about itself, as opposed to knowing about an apparent object, Awareness simply has to turn its attention around and direct the light of its knowing back towards itself, towards the source of attention. In fact, awareness cannot really turn round towards itself in order to know itself, any more than the sun can turn around in order to illuminate itself. So it is not really a turning around of the attention. That is just said as a concession to the object-knowing mind. It is rather a falling back of the attention into its source. A dissolution of the attention in its source of pure awareness. The poet, Alfred Lord Tennyson, said this: "Seek knowledge like a sinking star beyond the utmost bounds of human thought." Seek knowledge, that is, if we want to seek true knowledge, that is, knowledge that is not dependent upon or relative to the mind. In other words, if we want knowledge that is absolutely true, not relatively true, we have to seek it like a sinking star, not by going outwards towards the object, but by this sinking of the attention into itself, into its source, beyond the utmost bounds of human thought. He means prior to the arising of thought. This returning of the attention to its source is what is sometimes called the sinking of the mind into the heart. Not the physical heart, but the sinking of the mind into the heart of pure awareness. This return of the mind to its source. In religious terms, It is called the practice of the presence of God. In this return of the separate self to its source, it is occasionally, suddenly, but in most cases, gradually, through a series of revelations, progressively divested of all the limitations that thought and feeling have superimposed upon it. And at some point it stands revealed as it truly is, the ever-present and unlimited presence of awareness. This revelation of our true nature occasionally happens suddenly and unsolicited, in which case it may have a dramatic effect on the body and the mind. And as a result, we spend 10 years sitting in a temple, or 2 years sitting on a park bench, unable to reconcile our new understanding with everyday life. But in most cases it happens in a much quieter way, often not even registered by the mind at first. But gradually makes itself known in our experience as peace that pervades all experience, and in time bubbles over into the foreground of experience as happiness. Happiness is the signature of this recognition. The veiling or ignoring or forgetting of our true nature is therefore felt as an absence of happiness and a corresponding search for it. And to begin with, we search for happiness in objects, substances, situations, activities, and relationships. Having been failed sufficiently often by these objects, we begin to suspect that what we have deeply longed for all our life lives in another direction, in the directionless direction. In fact, the experience of suffering is, in fact, a message from happiness itself. It is a message in which happiness says to us, "You are looking for me in the wrong place. You are looking for me in the wrong direction. I'm behind you. Turn around. If you only turn around and give me your attention, I will take you into myself." This turning around seems to be an activity that is undertaken by the separate self. In fact, it is the last act that the apparently separate self performs. Our search for happiness is, in fact, the pull from happiness. It is not the separate self that moves towards happiness. It is happiness that attracts the separate self towards itself. And this is why it is said that our love for God is God's love for us. That is why in the parable of the prodigal son, the son has left his home, seeking happiness in the realm of objects, and has got to the end of his tether. He is eating the pig's food. There is nowhere else for him to turn. And at that moment, there is a spontaneous turning around towards the Father. But that is the last thing the prodigal son does. The prodigal son doesn't go towards the Father. The Father comes running to meet him and places on him the purple robe of love, the cloak of happiness. Thank you.